We'll start a couple minutes early. I just want to point out to everybody that we unfortunately lost Jennifer Buckham as she resigned her position on the board to accept, I shouldn't say we lost her, we kept her, but she's our new volleyball coach at the high school, so we're going to miss her. We've advertised for an appointment. We've had 12 applicants for that, and the board will be meeting on Wednesday to begin the process of reviewing the applicants. So I just wanted to kind of point that out to everybody. And then I'll turn it over to you for the superintendent's report, Kevin.
Well, thank you, Skip, and just want to say, give a warm welcome to everyone in the audience and those watching the live stream this evening. We made it through the 22-23 school year. What a fantastic year it was. I'd like to take a minute to just really thank our hardworking and dedicated VCS staff for making this year so successful. We're so fortunate to have so many talented individuals working for Vicksburg Community Schools. So I want to just thank all of them and for helping to shape the future of our precious students. And also want to wish them a great summer break too. Make sure they can relax and recharge as we get ready for the 23-24 school year. Also, earlier this evening we had our retiree reception. I'd like to take a moment just to thank our wonderful retirees for their years of service. And of course, I want to wish all those retirees the best in retirement. They deserve it. Over 200 years of combined service and education out of our 8 retirees this year. So thank you, retirees. Enjoy. Very short report tonight. I'd like to start out just talking about what's going on in Lansing. It's fairly quiet in Lansing right now because budget talks are dominating. We're still waiting on the final school aid budget. I think most of you are aware it's due by July 1. We should have those numbers. We're pretty confident that this week and maybe early next week they're going to be extremely busy. And hopefully we'll get the governor's signature before July 1 so we can continue planning. Obviously tonight is our budget public hearing, and so we look forward to hearing that Steve's report later on. As in your packet, as well as we await the budget, we have been very busy hiring. And in your packet, you will see the list of positions that have been filled and some of the open positions. We are very, very excited about a lot of our new hires, and we're very, very excited about filling these positions in the very near future. Stay tuned as the summer goes on. I will continue to provide updates on staffing, but feel very happy where we are. Knowing that we just ended the 22-23 school year. And also in your packet, you will find the board meeting dates for the 23-24 school year. If you do have any questions about those dates, locations, please reach out to Amy and she can help answer those questions. And with that, that's my report.
Thank you, Kevin. Any questions?
Well, I do have one about the dates.
Yeah,
Next
I do
year's
too.
dates, that's not incorrect, the October date is wrong.
That's what I thought too.
It's on a Thursday, you've
Yeah.
got it marked, and it needs to be that Monday,
Okay, good. I will
You said the
change that.
October date?
yeah, the October date is
Okay.
wrong.
Amy
Yeah.
was just trying to see who read the packet.
I'm really unimpressed.
I thought I made a mistake writing it down, so.
Thanks, Tina.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll go to reports and public inquiry. Our Transportation Department annual report, Karen. And I think did they tell you you're gonna talk, is Karen gonna talk over here? Or is she gonna be up there still? Okay.
Yeah, could give it a try.
I started to give her bum advice, see?
But she knows what direction
Karen,
she's going.
Karen learned a long time ago not to listen to me.
I know it's hard for you to you see me, but I'm really not what you want to look at. You want to look at the screen, but thank you for the opportunity to share with you. This awesome picture, if you guys know Jeremy Watson, he came in last summer and he did a photo shoot with us. I've been wanting to get I got to talk into the microphone. I wanted to get a photo shoot or get some pictures of the drivers and as a team, and we never had it. So Jeremy came in and he brought his drone, and he did an awesome job putting together a drone for us. I want to show it to you. So this started out our school year. Okay, I'm a little bit, there we go.
It's a great picture.
Yeah, let's see, I've got this facing the wrong way. That's why I'm having a hard time. Okay, here we go. So he came in and did this for us. It was exciting. Where'd it go? Is it because the computer died? Oops. Wait a second. Video cannot be loaded. Oh, no. I don't know what to do about that. Let me see. It worked a few minutes
Go to
ago.
autoplay,
Go to autoplay,
right there. And then top play.
top
Wonder if that, like,
play,
where's
way
the-
up there. Oh, goodness.
And that's gonna autoplay your slideshow, I think, actually.
Oh, it will? Then I,
Oh,
can
no,
I,
never mind, you don't want that.
oh, okay.
I know it was playing earlier.
It was.
Exit the slideshow and let's start it over.
Okay.
Cause it may have played
It might have
already.
just stayed there a long time, yeah.
So now,
Okay,
yeah, it's offline.
it's offline.
Hit no thanks.
I didn't see that.
No, hit no thanks.
Here's my. It's not even letting me show my slideshow, is it?
Do your slides. You go down to the little globe, down here.
Where?
You're right.
This
To
one?
the right, where the time is.
Time. Here?
A little bit further.
Right there. Right on that.
Not connected.
They click on network and internet settings.
Oh, no, Steve, what are you gonna do? So I need, what do I do?
Show available networks.
See if I can get internet and we can switch it to my computer.
Yeah, let's, tell you what, let's use mine here.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry. I don't know what this is all about.
I'll email it to you.
Thank you.
Okay. So now we'll just use your laptop and I won't have to use the mouse?
We'll just wait for it to pop.
That's a good way to start out. So there's been so much going on in transportation, I've been having the tapes just are rolling and rolling, and I can't tell you about everything, but there's been a lot happening. It's been so busy. We have lost a couple drivers this year, but we have gotten, ever since we invested in that sign, which I'll show you, I've got 4 people in training.
Awesome.
2 of them have already are licensed and ready for the fall, and 2 more trained, so I'm very excited about that. Oh, gosh.
Okay, use Google Slides, so
View.
where is the?
What you do, view, yeah.
Of course, I need to plug into the display.
Can I just do this? I mean-
Well, I mean.
Oh,
we
yes,
connect
gotcha,
display,
okay.
so- All right, now,
so look this way, not over there. Not paid no attention to the people behind the curtain. All right, so in your packet, you have our Section 98B progress report. Just a reminder that this comes from the Section 98B of the Public Act 144. Requires us to set educational goals at the start of every year and report on them in February and at the end of the year. The goals that you have in your report are at the top of each building's page. They indicate those goals that were set in September. And then the winter and end of the year results for our K-8 STAR reading and STAR math assessments. At the high school, you have a narrative describing the program. So, on June 1st, our district members of each building came together to analyze the results of our STAR reading and STAR math assessments. We celebrated certainly the areas where we met our target, and then we agonized over the areas that we did not. We want you and our families to know that we are not where we want to be, where we know we need to be for our students, and where we know we can get to with our students. I will say that working with our building teams, the results that you see in some cases are not due to a lack of effort, a lack of care, or a lack of dedication from our teachers. As I talk with other curriculum directors in other districts, they too are struggling, particularly at the middle school, to come out of our pandemic. There was, where we were in the pandemic. So not an excuse, but it does explain that middle school is having a really tough time coming out of the pandemic. So on June 1st, our buildings, the building team members reviewed our current continuous improvement plan, looked at what actions we need to take to sustain where we're actually meeting our targets and making the growth that we want. And then we also looked at what activities we might need to do or add to our continuous improvement plan to get us where we need to be. For example, some things that we talked about with the middle school team was to continue to review and revise our ELA course, including the structure and the resources. So this year we started a complete review of our English courses at the middle school. So we're looking at resources, we're looking at time allocation, we're looking at lesson planning and instruction, so how we can better support our students in learning. Reestablishing a culture of reading in all classrooms, not just in English. Helping students to review their own data and take that data seriously and personally, and helping them chart their growth. Be intentional in analyzing the data at the student level. So not just stopping with the aggregate numbers, but actually digging down and looking at who are these students and where can we, which students do we need to move through small group instruction. The ELO intervention, that's our extended learning time at the middle school. We looked at how we can better allocate time within those periods, as well as use our assessment data better to inform our instruction. We're also going to look at analyzing the attendance data at our middle school and student engagement, and how those two factors might play into the students' achievement. And then lastly, summer services have not been an effective format. In fact, we sent over 100 letters out to students at the middle school level for summer school and got 8 back. 8 positive responses back, and of those, not all of those students would be able to attend all of the days. So we are going at it a little bit differently than bringing the students in. We're going to provide some additional instruction over the summer, but we're going to do a more intentional after-school programming and support next year. While the kids are actually there, do some intervention with them at that point. So looking at some alternatives for summer school. With that, what questions might you have? I was looking forward to coming after Steve's report, so that you guys will be like, okay, good enough, let's go.
We're done, yeah.
If you have questions, specific questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me or the building administrators.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, let's give this a
Okay,
try.
Karen.
Transportation. It had music to it, but that doesn't work. I don't know how well that works, but it was just a fun little, say hi to everybody. I thought it'd be a great advertisement for the community. He showed his talents off with his drone. It was a lot of fun. So every year in August, we bring the drivers in for an orientation. We go over driving exercises, backing up maneuvers, a lot of things just to keep them sharp with their skills. And we took a minute out to do this. We meet in here and we get some of our paperwork done and training and things that we have to get taken care of for the year. And then we also spend time preparing for our safety carnival. Last year was our second annual and it was absolutely a riot. Things went really well. We had a lot of participation. So he kind of gave us a nice little picture of Vicksburg. It was kind of cool. It would have been more fun if there was music too. But yeah. Yeah. But it was a real beautiful day, so we had a lot of fun doing that. I think our group kind of felt a little bit more like a team. I think we're finally getting to the point where, you know, the relationships are really building nicely and feeling more of a team down here. So here's some pictures from our safety carnival. It was a great success. This is where we took the kids out for a bus ride. Their parents get to ride with them. The parents can't ride with kids except if they're a chaperone on a field trip or something. So kids learn the rules. We go down the road. Parents learn what we expect of the kids on the bus. It's always a good thing. They have a lot of fun. They love getting on that bus and riding it. A lot of different groups came to provide some games and fun. So we do the safety, that was the ride along, and here's some pictures of some of our vendors that came. We had some really big groups that kind of came in to visit us, but I thought it was kind of cool to look at Indian Lake. Had 33 students come, and Sunset Lake had 36, and Toby wins with 59 kids. So that's awesome, and every child had to come with at least one parent, so now we're at 260 people, and a lot of them came with another parent or a grandparent, but they definitely had fun. Space bar. And we had a visit from the Michigan Balloon Corporation, Brock Sperry. He brought his balloon for us. That was exciting for the kids to watch the balloon. They could go right up to the basket and talk to him. They had a little hard time keeping it on the ground because it was pretty windy that day, but that was one of our special visits last year. This is Chris Cowell demonstrating how we do an emergency evacuation out the rear door. We get a sit down and then scoot off. We have trouble with those middle school and high school kids. They want to just jump, and so we're trying to work on that because we don't want any messed up ankles. So they practice it with the kids, and over here on the right, we're doing the crossing procedure. So if the parents understand what the crossing procedure is and why we do it, that will help us get it through to the kids. And so I want to start really young, practicing with them, teaching it to them, and so that's our goal in all of this. And this is an actual emergency evacuation drill that we had at the school this year already. And we've got helpers. The kids are a part of it. They're right there to help those kids not jump off. So, we got to remember that buses are the safest form of transportation. The vehicles are the most regulated vehicle on the road. We did unfortunately have an accident in October. It was a human error. It was unfortunate, but you know what? It proved that the buses are the safest form of transportation. We had 6 kids on the bus, no injuries. But we did our due diligence to make sure the driver was okay, make sure she knew what she was supposed to be doing. We put her through a road test again to make sure she had the skill as a third-party tester. Sent her for a DOT physical. Obviously, she had to have a drug and alcohol test that day too, but everything worked out well, and she was, she was shooken up, but it went really well. She was back driving the bus and loving those kids, but it was just kind of a testament to how these buses are built. It was a side impact, and the kids were fine. They didn't really know what happened, really. So, but things went very smoothly. I hope it never happens again. That's the goal. So, this May, I was invited to be a judge at the rodeo MAPT sponsors rodeos to invite bus drivers from all over. They do it by region, and Region 8 let us come up there to experience it. I judged, but we had other people from our department. We had Bubba and Haley Laffler and Eric Renzema and Bree Johnson came and competed. It was a lot of fun. There's like 12 different physical exercises that they have to do with the bus, driving it. There was 13 schools there, 60 drivers, and we were pretty proud of the fact that we placed 6 out of the 13, first time in 17 years we've been. We had no idea, I mean, we had like a guideline, but these schools have all the equipment and they could practice. They were practicing for weeks, but we still took 6th place. We only had 4 drivers. Some of them had a lot of drivers. So we were pretty excited, and my hope is to maybe bring it back to Kalamazoo County, our Region 14. We're trying to pull a team together to kind of pull it and get the drivers down here to get more active. It's just a really great exercise and a lot of fun for them. This is one of the videos of the drivers actually performing an alley dock, and they had to stay between the cones. It's, you know, like a road. You got to stay in your lane, and they had to back up. So everything was, if you touch a cone, you get demerits. If you knock a cone over, you get demerits. And so in this game, it's the less number is the better. So it was just, we were able to catch one of the buses. That is our bus. I don't remember which driver it is, but. So the rear of the bus, you know, I mean, even though it can clear that cone, they've got sticks in them, so it takes the cone out here. But she's supposed to back up and be within 2 feet of the cones at the back of the alley dock. They call it an alley dock. There goes that cone. But she's got to be within 2 feet or she gets demerits, and she cannot go past or even touch those cones at the rear. So that's how that works. It's just one of the 12 things that they had to do. This is a list of my drivers that I've had this year. I got a couple underlined because Teresa Fouts left us this year and Alice Cronk finished off the year but won't be back. So I'm not too discouraged because we look really good. I'm trusting we'll be able to put 21 back in and maybe even another route to kind of help some of the routes. So this lists all of our bus drivers. This is just some fun pictures. Jane Crandall is one of our newest drivers this year. She and her husband came from Illinois. They were both licensed. So that was pretty awesome. And then Leilani's over there on the right. During the holiday season, we found out that our department was pretty generous. We sponsored 2 families, and these are the drivers that, you know, gathered the gifts and delivered them. We all gathered at the garage and wrapped presents. We provided gifts and food for 7 children and 4 adults with the 2 families, so that was pretty cool. And another thing that we did, I don't have any pictures on here, is one of the girls brought in compassion, and we raised enough money to provide a goat for, let's see, that was in Sri Lanka, a family that came on hard times, but the goat provides them an opportunity to sell, to make some money, to have the cheese and the milk, and so it helps families out a lot. And then now that we had some money left over, so we were able to sponsor a child, a malnourished child. So that was kind of neat to watch the drivers step up and do that. I felt like that was pretty cool. So our new employees, Norlin and Jane, they're the ones from Illinois, and Connie Russell came on as a parapro. And then Eric Renza, obviously my assistant, he's my right-hand man. And I didn't get Bubba's name on here, but as you all know, Alan Reynolds, our mechanic, we couldn't do what we do without him, so I don't want to neglect mentioning him. This is the sign. You might have seen it on the bus out in front of the high school, and in came applicants. It was amazing. It was really good. We've already made the money from the sign that we purchased here, so I'll be putting it back up this summer again, because you can't ever have enough drivers. We've traveled a lot of miles this year. Regular education buses traveled 265,500 miles. Our special education, 69,500 miles, and a grand total of 335,000 miles this year. And you know, to do that, we got to use fuel. So we had 26,000 gallons, 370 of gasoline. We use that in our gasoline buses, our vans, and any of the maintenance vehicles. And then diesel, 25,628 gallons. That's going to go down because eventually, as we make our next purchase, we're going to have less and less diesel vehicles. And then our athletic trips, we traveled 16,600 miles, and field trips. It was so fun to see the schools be able to do these field trips again. They had some really fun trips, so that was 7,500 miles. And we are actually in the process of getting bids to remove our underground tanks, which there's a lot of reasons. Moving us forward in the future, it's gonna provide us with more parking underneath the ramps, more room. We are gonna go to 1,000-gallon above-ground tanks. And I had considered the wet lining, but I think we're gonna save like 40 cents a gallon. And when you're talking about all those gallons of fuel, it'll be a lot of money. So we're gonna keep the drivers fueling those buses, but they're moving, and we're getting kids to school. Then we were visited by the seniors, as a lot of people were for the Senior Community Service Project. It was, what a blessing. Not only to have things done around there, but to see these kids, interact with these kids. I mean, I don't hear kids' names very often unless they're naughty. So it was kind of fun to see some kids that I'd seen their names a few times, but to hear where they've come and hear their goals, and so that was a real treat for us. They did a great job. So, like I said, we've done so much this year. This is the last picture here we've got. I've got one on my wall, but I'm thankful to Jeremy Watson for providing that for us. And this year, we're gonna have our 3rd annual safety carnival. If you haven't visited us, I hope you can visit us. It's August 17th. Last year, we had some awesome principals that were in the dunk tape, so hope we can do that again. The kids just love that opportunity. We actually had one of our kids, I'm sure they all would have loved to be in there, but Carter Iverson got in, and I got in the tank, so the kids had fun dunking him too. So it was a great time. We had a lot of vendors, and I'm hoping to get more people out there this year, so, and just teach that safety. So that's all I have for you today. I feel like there was so much more I could have told you, but.
I'd like to just make a comment. Yeah, you went, back on the slide where you listed all the drivers for the year and the ones that had, that are departing. And just want to thank you for all your work in keeping that pipeline of new drivers full. When you look at the last couple of years, a lot of school districts have had to make last minute cancellations of bus routes, not to mention trips and that kind of thing. And, we have not had to do that even once. So thank you, Karen, for keeping that pipeline full. And
It's not been
That's-
easy, we did have to eliminate that route this year, and it was inconvenient for a lot of parents at Indian Lake. They were so supportive and so understanding, because, to shuttle a bus from Indian Lake to Toby, we're driving right past their neighborhoods. It's not what I wanted to do, but in order to make that work. And so I'm excited that we're gonna get that back together this year. It's community support, it's people understanding, and I would tell parents, I don't wanna call you on 5 o'clock in the morning and tell you, I'm sorry, your bus isn't running. So we work really hard to avoid that. That's my goal, so,
We're really blessed to have our drivers.
we are.
Over the years, I've gotten to know several of them. I mean, they all care about kids. And that's so important. I watch them when they're letting them off the bus and making sure and crossing the roads and everything else. And I know I say this every year, but, our neighbors to the north, sometimes their buses, don't try and make any effort to let people go by or anything else. And I'm always proud of our Vicksburg buses, staying over, letting the traffic clear, and just being good people on the road. And I think it makes Vicksburg look good. So we are very blessed to have all of you.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Well, thanks. Thanks for your computer, Steve. I'm so sorry about that little
no, that's,
glitch.
I'm just looking at the blue network cable, and I'm thinking it must have been unplugged from the back of the computer, because I think that was our issue, so.
All right.
But at any rate, we'll get
If
that
anybody
taken care
wants
of.
to join us for the safety, just give me a call. I could put you in a place, it'll be a lot of fun for you. It is August 17th, 5:30 to 6:30.
Thanks, Karen.
Yes, absolutely. I'll just leave this in your hands.
Yep, I'll take it from there. Hopefully.
Yep.
Be a little too difficult.
I probably didn't talk into the microphone like you told me to.
You did pretty good.
right.
Our
right,
budget and finance report with Steve.
Okay, before I get into the fun part, which I understand from at least a couple board members have been waiting since last June 13th for the next one, so I'll try not to keep you waiting too much longer. But first, I'd like to quickly go through the monthly budget progress report. This has activity through the end of May, and I'll make just a couple of quick comments. I'm going to try to move through this pretty quickly, but obviously if there are questions, please let me know. But looking at the general fund for the month of May, or with activity through the end of May, we have, in terms of total revenue, 26,878,601, which is about 70, not quite 74% of what I'm proposing as the amended budget, which we'll cover those details in just a little bit. On the expenditure side, instructional expenditures year-to-date totaled 15,673,864. That's about 74% of the annual budget, which might seem a little bit counterintuitive. We obviously have finished the school year, but when we prepare the monthly financials, they're really more or less on the cash basis, and then we go through a closing process over the summer where we will book all the assets and liabilities for summer pays and those kinds of things. So when I say we're 3/4 of the way through the budget, keep in mind that there's a lot of activity that'll get recorded after as we close everything out. So total instructional expenditures, 15.67 million. Support services year-to-date 10.3 million. That's about 80% of the revised budget. And then there's a breakdown there with athletics and community services. And so on a year-to-date basis, expenditures totaled 27,095,284. And so just based on the revenue that's come in to date, that's a shortfall of about 216,000. And we talk pretty regularly about kind of the ebbs and flows of cash flow and how the timing of our various revenues kind of line up with, and how that compares to our expenditures. So there's nothing about that shortfall that's concerning at this point. That's merely a snapshot in time. And as we also talked about, we will collect a substantial amount of our revenue after June 30th. So that's also part of that year-end close. All right.
So when will you see it? Like, there'll be the July report or August report?
Well, we will, we'll close the books through, August. We'll receive July and August state aid. We're in, then we'll be in the process of booking the summer payrolls and all that kind of stuff. So we won't see, closed out, completed year-end numbers until September, October, realistically. All right. Let's see, just a quick note, expenditures by object code, which is page 2 of that, the normal monthly budget progress report. Salaries and benefits, they're at about 75.1% year-to-date, or 21,803,545. Purchase services and supplies are each around between 83 and 85% of the annual budget. Purchase services are at not quite 3.2 million. Supplies are at just under 1.7 million. Capital outlay year-to-date just about 279,000, and then other expenditures are at 148,893. And if you're looking at that report, that will show up as being slightly over 100% of the budget. Again, part of that close, we will book a transfer from the food service fund, which represents recovery of indirect costs, which is allowable under federal regulations. So we will calculate that indirect cost recovery and post that over the summer as well. So while we show being over budget there, that indirect cost recovery is an offset against those other expenditures, so that'll bring us back down. All right, any questions on that? All right, if not, then very quickly, there is also a schedule of investments, which I'll just give a quick update. As we've talked about in prior months, we have investments in our 2 bonded construction funds. All those investments are through MILAF, or the Michigan Liquid Asset Fund, with PFM Asset Management, which is a large municipal, governmental, school, like public sector investment company. So they're very much in tune with investments that are allowable under Michigan law, as well as board policy, and in terms of, everything is compliant and very, very safe. You can see that in the 2022 Building and Site Fund, we are, now at that point as construction is starting to ramp up. We're going to have several of those treasury notes that will be maturing each month through the summer, and that will provide the cash flow to fund our construction commitments and invoices. All right. There's some funds remaining in the 2020 Building and Site Fund. Those are all liquid in a cash management fund. We have a small amount of debt retirement funds invested as well. And then the general fund, again, very, rising interest rates are kind of a double-edged sword, but, we're in a pretty good position here in Vicksburg as, we issued bonds last year in 22, and, while rates were still very favorable, as interest rates have come up very rapidly, we have taken bond proceeds and funds within, the general fund, debt retirement, and we are investing those just to maximize interest earnings. And interestingly, in the month of May, for the first time, certainly since I've been with the district, which is quite a while now, the general fund actually generated just over $20,000 in interest income. So I can think of years in, the early to mid 2000s, as well as in the 2010s, where, I don't think we earned $1,000 over the course of a year, net of fees and all that. So, we're doing what we can to maximize cash flow and generate as much investment income as we can. So that's where we stand there. Any questions on the investment schedule? All right, if not, then we'll get into the budget hearing. And so, a couple things here. I'm going to try to move through it reasonably quickly, but I want to, I was talking to Skip before this, I always kind of struggle with like the right level of detail so that it's helpful and informative, but it's not confusing and overwhelming. So usually I'll start to see people nodding off a little bit or looking confused, and so I apologize in advance. I'm going to try to make it understandable, and if you have questions, please stop me. So, all right, first thing, all of the emphasis tonight is going to be on the general fund. That's where the vast majority, all the general operations of the school district run through the general fund. So that's my emphasis. Included in the packet are proposed amendments and budgets for the other funds, and asking the board to adopt those as well this evening. And I'm happy to talk about those, but I'm planning on focusing on the general fund. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about the revisions to the 22-23 budget. And then we're going to talk about 23-24, and I'm going to, especially with 23-24, I'm going to share some information about the initial projections for total revenue, total expenditures, and that type of thing. But the focus should be really on the assumptions, because, all the big assumptions are still up in the air. And, we won't know for sure what those look like for several months in some cases. So stay tuned for that. And then I'm going to make a few comments about fund balance. And then there is a procedure here this evening, and that's the budget hearing, which allows us to levy our full 18 mills of non-homestead property taxes. All right? Any questions before I jump into it? Okay. All right, first, we're gonna take a look at 22-23, and I'll say, the news is actually quite positive. The district is in, I would say, stable, healthy position right now. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but just to kind of talk about the numbers, I've got, again, just looking at it from a high level, I've got total revenues, expenditures, the difference in those, and then what that means regarding fund balance. You can see that 21-22, we have actual figures there, and then we have the initial budget for 22-23, what I'm proposing for revisions, and then finally the amended. And so we started the year, I'd say the theme is a little bit the same as the last couple years. There's a lot of federal money flowing through, and there are some, we have to make some assumptions on when and how we're gonna satisfy the grant requirements to collect the revenue. So, that can create some pretty decent amendments or revisions as we, progress through the year. And then, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about the specifics of the changes in the revenues and expenditures, but the bottom line is we started the fiscal year with just under 6 million in total general fund balance. With the initial budget last year, we had expected to add a further $750,000 to fund equity. And based on this revision, it appears that we should come in a little bit better than that. So right now, we're projecting not quite a 1.2 million increase to fund equity. If that is how everything pans out, then we would end up just over 7 million for fund equity. All right? So, looking at the revenues, I want to talk a little bit about what makes up those changes, because those are some significant revisions. So first, we know that projected revenue is going to increase by a little over 3.1 million. And so here's a little bit of a breakdown. Big part of it is related to MIPSers, or the School Employees Retirement Plan. I think everybody at least has a working understanding of the unfunded accrued actuarial liability and the funding that flows through districts to help try to reduce that unfunded liability. We started the year anticipating about 2.3 million in funding under what's called Section 147C. That money it's just a straight pass-through. So we had expected 2.3 million. Actually, that allocation for 147C1 came in closer to 2.7 million. But that makes no difference, because whatever we get, we turn around like 4 days later and wire that money directly in the exact same amount to the retirement system. Well, because the state budget has been in pretty good shape, there were some supplemental appropriations, and one of them was a substantial additional installment of Section 147. In this case, they titled it Section 2 of 147C. And there was an additional roughly 1.9 million, 1.6 million of additional Section 147. So you can see that the increase in 147C1 and 2 at 1.9 million. Now you see that on the expenditure side as well. In addition, our enrollment came in better than expected. We actually were up. I think I had projected that we were going to be down 20, and we were actually up 60. I'm sorry, we weren't up 60, we were up 40, but the net change was 60. That's a significant positive variance. The one thing I'd like to point out is when you look at our traditional K-12 enrollment, it's actually pretty stagnant to declining. Where we've really seen the growth is in our virtual program as well as Pathways upstairs. Those two programs continue to account for a larger share of our overall enrollment. So just want to point that out. Nevertheless, that was a positive variance that helped us out. There were several additional state categorical grants that totaled over $600,000. There's just a lot of money flowing through the state right now for mental health, school safety, and those types of things. And so, you know, in many cases, we don't necessarily know about these until we're well into the school year. So those were not even contemplated last year during the budget time, and so those have gone through. Typically, when we get those kinds of categoricals, though, they come with strings attached. We have to spend the money in accordance with the legislation, all right? So that's just something to keep in mind. Investment earnings, I mentioned this. Insurance, Karen mentioned that we had a bus accident, and that bus was a newer bus. And to look at it, the damage, you know, there was definitely some visible body damage and that type of thing, but because the frame had broken or bent, the bus was totaled. So that was, we had a couple other smaller claims, but we had $155,000 of insurance proceeds. I like to point that out because it shows up as revenue, but we have to replace things with that. That's not, you know, that's not a windfall by any means. All right, investment earnings, those rates have been increasing really kind of through the school year, but they've really kind of, you know, reached a level where we're making significant investment income now. So we don't have the full year impact of those higher rates, but we do estimate that this year, compared to what we had projected, we should be $115,000 to $120,000 higher in investment income. So, other revenue, you know, we have a lot of different local programs, from childcare to athletic gate receipts and athletic event gate receipts. There's a lot of different items there, but you know, there were kind of miscellaneous revenue adjustments throughout that were about $146,000. And then two items that reduced our revenue. One was, I mentioned the timing difference with some of the federal funding and the pandemic-related grants. And we were able to capture, you know, around $300,000 of additional federal revenue last year. And so that reduced what was available for this year. So it's a, you know, it's a reduction, but it's really just a timing difference. And then finally, there was some additional, our state revenue related to special ed had increased. That combined with coming in a little bit below expectation on our overall special education budget meant that there was a reduction in the payout for this year. So that's just, there's a reduction there of $162,000. Was related to a couple of different things, but the majority of that related to special ed. And so finally, the sum of all those totals just over 3.1 million. Any questions on that part yet? Okay. I'm gonna walk back and grab my water real quickly, but starting here, I've got kind of a breakdown of the increases. Oh, thank you very much. All right, so I just kind of look at this in terms of where, you know, where we spend a lot of our money. Employee compensation is obviously, you know, over 80% of our total budget. And so I kind of break it down. We talked about the Mitchell's revenue on the other, you know, on the previous slide, had gone up by 1.9 million. So that is also in expense. Just in, again, I can't say it enough. It's an in and an out. It has no impact on the bottom line. Then our salary budget came in, at least based on the projection most recently, should be an increase of about $420,000. And so that's going to be a combination of normal pay increases, a couple collective bargaining settlements, but also some additional positions. You know, we've been adding. And so, you know, you see that reflected in this figure here. And then in some of the benefit assumptions that I started the year with, we were a little bit conservative, and so I brought some of those benefit line items down by 101,000. All right? On the purchase services, pretty big increase there. But again, I mentioned that a fair amount of it's related to grant-related activities, you know, and so that's just a, you know, throughout the instruction and instructional support, we added about 412,000. Facilities and operations, we added just over 100,000. And there again, that is in large part related to grants. So we have, we're in the process of completing critical incident maps to assist everybody, especially first responders in the event of an emergency. That's funded by a grant, as well as, you know, physical assessments of the facilities and that type of thing. So those are included in that. And then just elsewhere on the administrative side, we had an increase of about 53,000. And on the supply budget, or supplies and others, those, I've reduced the budget there by 111,000. And the majority of that relates to, if you think back a year ago, we were really starting to talk about inflation. Energy prices were going through the roof. Gas prices were up. Natural gas prices were up. Electrical rates were up. So I had some pretty conservative estimates in there for energy costs. We still saw a huge increase, but you know, we came in a little bit better than expected. So we reduced that budget by 111, and so the net increase in costs is 2,678,000. And that's how you know, between the increased revenue, which came in better than the increase in expenditures, so we expect at this time to have an increase in fund balance. Any questions there?
With more buildings being, having air conditioning, will that change some of that energy expectation, or are we kind of planning for that already, or?
Well, you know, that's a really good question, and something that I'm not 100% sure yet, because we know that we're picking up some efficiencies, because as we're going through the buildings, you know, everywhere we replace windows, the windows are far more energy efficient. LED, you know, the LED lights should have a significant impact. So it's going to depend a little bit on, you know, the extent, the weather, the extent to which we use the cooling, and that type of thing. I know when we were planning, you know, our engineers, Tower Pinkster, you know, they believe that the savings from the other improvements that, you know, improve our energy efficiency should essentially offset the increase in cooling costs. I'm not, you know, I just have to wait to see how that plays out, you know, because I think you can use a lot of different assumptions. We're going to see how it plays out.
I'm assuming we need to go through a few cycles before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And, you know, and especially because as we continue to do this work and we're doing electrical service upgrades in some cases, you know, we have buildings that, you know, where the power is shut off over the summer, in some cases for weeks, you know, and so it's hard to, you know, it's going to be hard to make that comparison, I think, until we get more experience. But it's a good question, so we'll see. I wish I had a definitive answer, but I don't. All right? Okay, other questions on the amendment? Okay. So, I'd like to switch gear then and just talk a little bit about the key assumptions used in developing the budget. And the one thing I can tell you is that nothing here will be exactly right. They're estimates, you know, and so that's just reality. So, but let's talk about enrollment. I'm projecting that we're going to be down by 30 kids, and I hope we have another miss like we did this year. That reduction is really based on what we see with, you know, this year we had a pretty large graduating senior class. A lot of years we're in the 170s to 180s, our low end 180s, and this year we were around 195. So that's a, at, currently 91.50 per kid, that's a lot of money that goes out. On the flip side, we have kindergarten enrollment. In our kindergarten enrollment, I'm going to be very interested to see where it ends up. But so far, it's lagging a little bit. I think the last figures I saw, as far as new kids, new BK or beginnergarten and kindergarten kids, it was around 170. And a lot of times between the new BK and new K students, we were more like 190, 200, 210. So we still have some time, and I'm hopeful that we'll continue to see some enrollments and those numbers will come up. But right now, on the surface, it seems pretty clear that we're on track for a reduction. Now, it's difficult for me to know for sure what's going to happen with the two sort of non-traditional programs. I mean, those are, it's just going to depend on demand for those specific programs. So hopefully we'll see some increase there, but nevertheless, at this point, I'm planning for what I hope will be a worst case scenario of being down 30, all right? Per pupil funding, talked about the state budget's still up in the air. I think it's, there's no reason why it shouldn't be completed fairly soon, but we're gonna have to wait and see. Now, I try to be conservative, but I try to be reasonable in my assumptions. I try to be safe. I try not to create, panic or a worst case scenario. In this case, I'm actually using the highest proposed per pupil foundation. This is the Senate's proposal at $9,700 per kid. The governor's proposal is a little bit less than that. The House proposal is even less than that. When you look at the three proposals, however, they all take a slightly different approach. And the House especially, there's a lot of like new categoricals and that type of thing. It's just, we're gonna have to see how the legislature and the Senate and the governor work it out. And I'm hoping that more money goes into the just basic per pupil foundation. Sometimes, when you get all these different categoricals and it's everybody's pet program, that, a lot of times isn't really helpful. It doesn't really help the district, do what we're trying to do. Some of them, we appreciate all the additional money, but we prefer to see it just in the foundation allowance. So we're gonna have to see on that, all right? So those are two big assumptions. And enrollment, we won't know till the fall. Per pupil funding levels, hopefully we'll know in the next month or so. Employee compensation, I want to make a few comments here. I'm sure there's one or two people in the audience that are very interested in these assumptions. So don't panic. I've stated here that the projection includes not quite 0.6 million of additional money towards compensation, which is only a 2% increase. Do you think you can sell that, Kelly?
Ooh, that'd be
Yeah. Keep in mind, I talked about the section 147, and that, again, that can distort things. So this year, there's a substantial amount of additional section 147 money in there. When I back that out, the net increase to employee compensation, when you exclude the effect of the retirement specific funding, is closer to a $1.5 million increase and about 6.2%. Now I know that's, that's a bigger percentage than we've talked about as far as like compensation increases, certainly in the 20 years that I've been here. That being said, it's, we know that we're gonna have to do what we can to be competitive. It's not getting easier to hire staff, and we need to be able to provide competitive compensation packages to be able to do that. So stay tuned. I'll talk about, I'll kind of finish this and then we'll talk about what I see are like the big risks as we look at the budget going forward. Non-compensation, I'm anticipating smaller, well, 7% increase, which equates to under $500,000. But there's some capital outlay that we need to get caught up on. It's been hard. We've been trying to replace vans so that, or add vans, because our vans get a lot of use, and we need to expand that. It's been very, very difficult to, is Karen, I'm looking for Karen here to back me up. Did she sneak out? I don't blame her. We need, there's some maintenance vehicles, right, Dewey? We've talked about that. There's some capital outlay that we need to catch up on. So I've increased that budget slightly. So a lot of that increase is related to planned capital purchases. I'm anticipating that supplies, purchase services, we're gonna keep a lid on, and they should be fairly stable.
Using those vans is important though. I mean, we've experienced it already. It used to be we'd drive a bus to
Yeah.
carry the golf team.
Yep,
Now we're driving a van.
right.
It's a lot more fuel efficient and everything else.
It is, and, it's not that, I think, when we initially bought the vans, there was a concern. If you're a driver and you rely on doing trips, that's, when am I gonna not be able to do trips? We still have a lot of trips, a lot of buses going out, but sometimes we don't have enough drivers, and sometimes it's just more convenient to use a van. So, we're glad to have those and expect to continue to use them, so. Any other questions on the big assumptions for next year? All right. I want to look at projected revenues. And so, based on those assumptions, I'm projecting total revenue of just under 37 million. So continue to grow. I mean, the budget is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And if we went back to just a few years ago, pre-pandemic, there's been a tremendous amount of growth since then. But also in our costs, so it's a constant challenge. But you can see here, I provide a pie chart just to provide a little bit of context. We report our revenues based on what the state refers to as major class or the source of income, and we break that down between local, state, federal, and other. And it can be a little bit misleading because the foundation allowance affects both local and state revenues because we have to levy 18 mills on non-homestead properties in order to, those are, I guess the way I would say it is, those are the first dollars for the foundation allowance. If we don't collect that, state doesn't care, we still, our foundation will still be set to whatever the state is, but the state deducts the levy, which they have that information based on taxable values and all that. They just deduct that 18 mills and then pay the difference through state aid. So you see, I won't go into too much detail on that, but the foundation allowance is a component of both local and state revenues. The foundation allowance, you can see, so just based on our projected enrollment, the 9,700, the total foundation allowance would be projected at 25.6 million. And based on our non-homestead property within the district, we should generate approximately 2.4 million, so that will come off, the state will pay the difference, all right? So almost 70% of our total revenue is derived from the foundation allowance. And then other state revenue, so those categoricals that I mentioned, but also the GSRP program or the preschool program, at risk, the list gets longer and longer every year. 31N, 31A, all of those different grants account for almost just over 18% of the budget. And then federal revenue, which I think, and Gail might back me up on this, that 2.8% of our general fund revenue probably consumes a large percentage of time. It's the compliance is extensive. So it's and I have to thank Gail and others, Sandra and Rebecca, for your help on that. I mean, it's a bear, to say the least. And then finally, we have some other local revenue, other local, the local revenue that isn't part of that non-homestead millage is about 1.8%. And then other revenue, that purple slice there at 7.7, that's primarily revenue that is passed through KRESA. That would be for special education, it would include the enhancement millage, it would include, in certain cases where we get reimbursed for career technical ed and education for the arts. All right. Any questions there? All right, so just for a second here, I'm projecting, let's call it 37 million on the revenue side. And then on the expenditure side, I've broken it down by function, with instruction being, of course, the primary function, which we expect to come in at 21.65 million. And that's further broken down between basic programs or just the general K-12 versus special ed, compensatory ed, and those types of things. Support services, 13.38 million, with 5.6 of that related to pupil support, instructional support, and building administration. And then general administration, or the Board of Education and Superintendent's Office, the business office, and then technology, HR, communications, being in the general business central, that's at 2.385 million. And then facilities and transportation at 5,386,000. Then, then we have athletics and community service at 1.3 million. I mentioned the interfund transfer. Again, that's indirect cost recovery from the food service fund. So total expenditures are projected to come in at 36,272,152. But again, all of that will change when we have actual enrollment, when we have actual state aid, when we complete our hiring, when we complete collective bargaining. So there's a, there's a lot of question marks still. 23-24 projected expenditures broken down by object. Hopefully by now, I think we talked about this quite a bit. In the general fund and the district as a whole, our primary expense is personnel. That's typical, and that's common. There's nothing, that's what you would expect to see in any traditional K-12 in the state of Michigan. So salaries and benefits projected to come in at 29.6 million. That's almost 82% of the projected budget, so it's a big number. Purchase services, we expect to be 3.8 million. Supplies at 2.0. Capital outlay, I mentioned, was going to increase. That's at 677. And then other expenditures at 161,750. Questions? Here is a summary. I kind of went through some of the detail. Hopefully the format is a little bit familiar. We've got 21-22 actual. We've got the 22-23 adopted and proposed amended budgets. And then finally the 23-24 proposed. And you can see there, we talked about revenue just under 37 million, total expenditures 36, not quite 36.3 million. And so right now, we're projecting an increase in fund balance of 723,000. That number, I want to point out, fully expect that in 23-24, and I mean, I'm hoping beyond hope, as I know Gail is, that we are done during 23-24 with all of that pandemic-related aid. Gail and I spent a lot of time working together, if you remember, during the housing, shortly after the housing crisis, and there was ERA. You've already, you might have blocked it out of your head. I certainly have. That was another situation where it was just a flood of federal money, and we needed it at the time. I mean, that was, but the compliance with that was astonishing. I mean, it was crazy, and sometimes some of the calculations were difficult to comprehend the purpose, but you do it, because there is no choice. And so, but at any rate, that pandemic-related aid for 23-24 is about 700,000. Keep that in mind. I'm going to come back to that in just a little bit. I've got another graph here on fund balance, but I'd just like to take a quick look. There's different ways to look at fund balance, obviously. I tend to look at it. I think one relevant measure is, what is your fund balance that you're starting the year with for your next year, for the year that you're starting? What is your projected budget, and what is that fund balance that you're starting with? And that's what these percentages are. And our fund balance has grown. It's grown by a meaningful amount, and that's good news. I'm thankful that it has.
Steve, I keep forgetting, what's the target percent-wise?
I'm gonna cover that on the next slide, but it depends who you talk to. Everybody, depending on your perspective, will have, a different range in mind and what's reasonable and not. From my perspective, in trying to sleep at night and not worrying about, significant financial difficulty, I prefer to keep it in that 15 to 20% range. We'll talk about why in just a minute. I know that some districts, and we've gotten by in a lot less, and some districts do, and there are a lot of districts with a lot more than that. Let me just, more questions on that, or would now be a good time to look at that fund balance slide? All right. So here's a history of our fund balance. And we have, all right, so there's a fair amount going on here, but the vertical bars represent the dollar value of fund balance at June 30th of each of the years listed. The line, and I'd say that that axis correlates with the left y-axis, if I'm saying that right. So the dollar value of fund balance on the left, and then the percentage of the annual budget on the right, and that's represented by the line graph. And, fund balance has gone up and down substantially. It can go really quickly if you're not careful. We, at one time, 2009, 2010, we were below 10%. We were, that was not a comfortable situation to be in. And that's, at 5%, then you trigger provisions in state law. And that's where things, you start looking at filing plans with MDE, and, you reach a certain level, and you could be looking at a financial manager, emergency financial manager, and that type of thing. So, but when we go back to that time, per pupil funding was stagnant or even declining. We were, there were several years where we experienced prorations. In one case, we had a proration in August for the year that ended in June. And so, those things can happen, and you have to be prepared. But, we were going through a period where we were trying to be competitive. We were trying to maintain programs. We were trying to be as deliberate as we could be. We knew we were spending fund balance down, and we felt at the time that it was important, that that's what we had to do. And it allowed us to make some adjustments over time rather than making knee-jerk reactions. And, if you go back, some of those years that were particularly ugly, I can think of a year where there were districts laying staff off in September. Fortunately, we've been able to, we haven't always avoided program cuts or layoffs or that type of thing, but we've tried to really minimize that. All right, so we expect fund balance should be pushing up close to 20%. That's a great position to be in. It's been easy, frankly, to raise fund balance over the last couple of years. For districts that weren't able to, I mean, I can't imagine a district not being able to increase its fund balance. And if they didn't, I think they're gonna be in a, you know, they're gonna have a tough road ahead at some point. I can't say exactly when that's gonna be, but, we have, you know, we have really used that federal funding the best that we can, but it's running out, and we have to, you know, keep in mind that it's not gonna just be as easy as picking up the phone and telling Keevan, hey, gotta hire, gotta add sections, we need X number, you know, it's just, we're gonna have to be a little bit more deliberate about it. All right, but certainly don't wanna sound doom and gloom, we're in very good shape, and I'm grateful to be in this shape, and I think it allows us then, you know, to take a hard look and do what we can to, we've gotta be competitive, you know, and so we're gonna have to stay tuned and see how all of this kind of plays out. But I kind of, you know, I put at least my logic and thoughts on fund balance. I know the MSBO, Michigan School Business Officials, recommend 15 to 20%. And I think I've talked about some of this. If you, you know, if we reduce our fund balance, we'll have to borrow for cash flow purposes. And we did that for a lot of years. We have been fortunate to not have to do that. You know, there were years when we would borrow, you know, $1 to $2 million, and at that time, interest rates were like 0.6%. I mean, it was, the cost on that borrowing was negligible. If you look at interest rates today, it's gonna be a different story. There's gonna be a significant amount of interest. It's great, we're earning interest, but if we have to borrow, we're gonna be paying interest. And we'll pay a higher rate than we're earning right now, you know, so that's just something to keep in mind. Another one, this doesn't affect us operationally, but, you know, we have been going out for bonds we've been asking the voters every 6 years, and then we issue bonds every 2 years. And we typically do 3 series between elections. One of the things that the rating agencies look at is fund balance when they assign the district credit rating. And so our credit rating is fine on its own, but it could use an upgrade, especially now with interest rates a little bit higher. So I think it's, you know, that is one of those things. I can't say for sure if where we're at today would potentially result in an increase in our bond rating, but it's possible. And one of the things that the ratings analysts mention every year is, I'd like to see fund balance a little bit higher. So I'm, you know, see how this plays out when we issue bonds, the 3rd series of the 20 bonds next year. So stay tuned on that. And then provides flexibility. Unanticipated cuts in enrollment allows us to adjust. Funding cuts, mid-year cuts, or again, it just provides us flexibility, and it gives us that opportunity to be a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more deliberate in making adjustments as we need to, rather than making big decisions with, you know, no notice. So, all right, questions on fund balance? All right, I think I've kind of talked about a lot of these. So I've kind of broken out what I see are some significant uncertainties, both near and medium term as well as longer term. Near term, to see where our actual enrollment comes in. Hopefully it's no worse than that projected decline. I don't think it will be, but you know, we're not going to know for sure until fall. The final state budget. I don't think we're going to have any major negative surprise there. You know, revenue collections are, you know, starting to raise a few questions, and I think it's clear it can't continue at the pace that it has been. There is a lot of concern, and it depends what day and who you listen to, what articles you read. But, you know, there probably will be another recession. It would be probably naive to assume that we're not going to have some sort of recession over the next several years. You know, the good news with that is there tends to be a little bit of a lag of 12 or 18 months between, you know, when businesses take a hit and when you see the slowdown in revenue, in state revenue collections. But it's probably gonna come, at some point, we're gonna have to be ready for it. Collective bargaining. Compensation is almost 82% of the budget today. It might be more than 82% of the budget by the time we're done with collective bargaining, but that's those are significant dollars, and we're gonna have to, try to do the best that we can while balancing the district's safety and everything else. Inflation, we continue to see that. I think there are signs that it's cooling off a little bit and easing, but, we'll see. It's still certainly higher than it has been for a long time. Longer term, I listed continued risk of inflation, recession risk. I don't know. If I knew for sure when a recession would happen, I'd probably have an office somewhere, and I love being here, but if I had that ability, I might be in the Cayman Islands, for instance, I don't know. Federal funding cliff, we talked about that. That's just something that we have to be cognizant of.
It's coming.
It's coming. And it can't come soon enough, as far as I'm concerned. Right, Gail? I mean, it's been good, but, and then longer-term enrollment trends. We are, I think you look around, you drive, we all have this tendency to drive around and see a new neighborhood, and wow, filling up really fast, and man, we're gonna be bursting at the seams, and we find there's usually kind of a short-term bump, but as I mentioned before, our traditional K-12 enrollment is stagnant at best, and if it weren't for these other programs, we would, the district would look significantly different than it does today, I'll say that. So, I just close with kind of a cautionary message. We, not saying don't spend, we have to invest. We have to invest in our people, we have to invest in our facilities, we have to do that, but we just gotta be deliberate and cautious. So, any questions here? Comments? So, at this point, we're getting close to the end, which I know is disappointing, but I assume you'll be able to watch the video later if you can't sleep. The budget hearing, which is what we're here for. So,
Yep.
I'm gonna turn it over to Skip, but the main thing here is we wanna levy our full 18 mills, which is what is required in order to receive our full per pupil funding. All right? So-
Thanks, Steve. Okay, this is an actual public hearing for comments and questions that you might have about what the presentation was, and I would open it up for any comments. Okay, hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. Thank you, Steve. I just want to say, it was what, 23 years ago, Steve? 24 years ago when you came here?
20, just over 20, actually, it's
Yeah, okay.
03. Yeah.
Yeah, it was 03, that's right. At that point in time, we felt we needed to get somebody with some accounting background, CPA and everything else, and we've been blessed to have Steve all that time. And I don't know how we'd have gotten through the last 20 years without you and without your expertise, so I just, I want to express that on behalf of the district and
I've
the
gained
public.
from everyone here, it's, thank you, but thank you to everybody.
You've, a job well done, that's what I want to say. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, we already had our exciting section 98B goal progress report scale. And we'll go on to audience then. I think we have two people that wish to address the board on a non-agenda item. DJ?
There, right here,
I think right there at that mic there.
Oh, either one.
Good evening. I'd like to first share the successes of the school year. The education that both of my children received this year were amazing. Both of them grew quite a lot educationally this year, so thank you so much for everyone involved in the educational process. But as I think we can all agree, we want to prepare our students for life after school outside of Vicksburg, right? Anyone disagree with that? All right. Well, last fall, we met with a couple of you in here, and a couple things that popped up that have been addressed and fixed. One of the things that was talked about was bullying, with some of the problems with bullying in Vicksburg, and also diversity and inclusion. On May 5th this year, it was actually brought to my attention that there's a group of parents in the district that have created kind of a hate group, anti-trans group within Vicksburg here. Currently, that group has 362 members. Some of those members are even employees of the school. So, wanted to draw attention to that. What I'd like to see us do here, as far as Vicksburg Community Schools, is doubling down our efforts on diversity and inclusion. We brought it up in the meeting in the fall. We kind of got chuckled at by our president over there saying, well, we couldn't bring those kind of things into the school. We'd get public outcry for that. But I think it's that time right now that Vicksburg needs to step up. Our kids aren't going to be able to hold jobs here. They're going to have to go outside of Vicksburg to actually work and to grow and to flourish. But we need to make sure that they're all prepared for that. That means they're going to run into a lot of other people that they're not used to that are part of the village of Vicksburg right now. So I'd like to see us double down those efforts. I'd like to see us branch out to other districts to see how they handle diversity and inclusion as well. I had an exchange daughter that graduated from Portage Central this year, and I can tell you the dynamic and the culture at Portage Central was completely different on how students interacted, engaged, and how diversity and inclusion was handled there. So again, what I'm asking from the board here is that we take a look at some of our programs and see if we can encourage more diversity and inclusion. There is quite a few students that identify in the LGBTQ plus community. Well, how do you think that looks to that student if they know that someone that's providing them education is part of a hate group? If we reverse this around and we actually put on there that one of the teachers was part of a group that didn't like a certain race, right? We'd probably walk them out the doors tomorrow, right? Same thing. This is another protected class of students. These are students that should feel comfortable with coming to the schools, not knowing that, hey, guess what? My parapro or my teacher is out there that doesn't agree with who I am. So again, two things I'm looking for from the board is that we look at more diversity and inclusion efforts in the district, and also that you look into these teachers, other people that are employees of the district, and suspend or terminate them. Because again, there's no room in our community for this kind of hate. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments, DJ. Okay, Remy Mills?
Hi, I'm Ramey Mills. I have a student who graduated last year. We've had 2 exchange students, and my middle schooler is going to be a high schooler who's involved with the schools. My family has been touched by bullying in Vicksburg schools on several occasions. My son ended up missing 3 days of school this year because he was so scared to go to school. There were more than 2 occasions where my son hid on campus because he was scared. And I had to call my daughter to come and get him because he was so scared. The staff at the school have been amazing. They've been great about calling. Or when I call and I'm upset, and when this is happening, they've shown a tremendous amount of support to my son. He's a 504 student. It is deeply disturbing to me, and I am scared every day I send him to school. The culture of bullying at Vicksburg is a problem. I currently am begging my son to go to another school, but he doesn't want to because he believes in school and his teachers that much. The parents of these students are a problem, and it is everything in my soul not to knock on their door. The bullying, the hate group that has been formed on Facebook, which I know you guys are aware of, is touching my family in ways that I don't want to out people, but it is touching my family. I am terrified for them to walk through this community because I'm scared for their safety. As DJ touched on, this is not something that's going to go away. Just because I have a family member that's touched by this doesn't mean that there's not other students that identify as this. I am a nurse. It doesn't matter what you've done, who you are, what you identify as. I would never turn away healthcare or compassion or empathetic listening and therapeutic communication skills to any of these people. It is ethically wrong. We have to invest time and money into diversity and inclusion training for people. It doesn't matter that we're a small town. It doesn't matter about any of that stuff. Change is coming. The mill is coming. This town is about to change in exponential ways. Come to Centennial. We have a large diversity of people that live there. There are people that move in here that are so excited about the idea of coming to a small community and getting that special one-on-one attention from the teachers, because we got really, really awesome teachers. But they can't be solely responsible for my son's safety. It is largely their job, but there's not enough of them. They can't watch him all the time. That's not possible, and that's like an impossible ask. We have to make sure that we change the culture of Vicksburg. I can tell you, I volunteered on a school trip, the trip to Detroit. I heard the N-word more that day than I have heard in rap songs. It is awful. Spend a day in the school. These kids, I don't know what is going on, but the N-word, the F-word, the R-word. We have to change the culture. Change is coming, whether we're ready or not. And I really, really, really don't want people having the idea that this is a hillbilly school, because that's what's happening. I plead with you, please, 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 we need to invest more in culture and diversity. I went and saw She Slays Dragons. I'm so sorry, I'm so thirsty right now. I went and saw She Slays Dragons that Melissa Sparks put on.
We've got about 1 minute.
Okay, that's fine. What an amazing production. That ended up giving these students such an amazing voice, and it just so much, I don't know, it just was a really good thing. I think that's a good place to start. I just want to put that out there. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Remy. Okay, anyone else wish to address the board? Okay, we'll go on to board action required. First item we have before us is approval of the following board meeting minutes, the first being dated May 8th, 2023, of the regular meeting, and May 15th, 2023, the special meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Stephanie,
Supported.
supported by Dan. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item B, approval of general fund invoices totaling $373,458.04.
So moved.
Moved by
Support.
Carol, supported by Tina. Discussion? Stephanie?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
And yes, motion carries. Approve purchase cards disbursements for April 2023 totaling $102,690.79.
So moved.
Moved by Stephanie,
Supported.
supported by Dan. Discussion? Stephanie?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
And yes, motion carries. Item D, approval to amend the 22-23 budgets and adopt the appropriations resolution for the 2023-2024 budgets for the following funds: general funds, special revenue funds, debt retirement funds, and building and site funds.
So moved.
Moved by Dan,
Support.
supported by Tina. Discussion?
Do you want me to go through that one more time?
No.
Yes.
We'll vote for it if you don't. Stephanie?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
And yes, motion carries. Item E, approval of the truth and budget on the proposed property tax millage rate for the 23-24 school year, and that's the 18 mils Steve was talking about.
Yes.
So moved.
Moved by Tina,
Supported.
supported by Dan. Discussion? Stephanie?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
And yes, motion carries. F, approval to renew membership for Vicksburg High School, Vicksburg Middle School, and the Michigan High School Athletic Association from August 1st, 2023 through July 31st, 2024.
So moved.
Moved by Stephanie,
Supported.
supported by Dan. Discussion? Stephanie?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
And yes, motion carries. Item G, approval of resignation of high school teacher Nicole Brugema, effective June 11th, 2023, and you all saw the letter of resignation in her.
Support.
We have did you make a motion, Carol?
Yes.
Okay, do we have a support?
Oh,
Supported by Tina? Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of tenure for the following teachers, and we'll take teachers 1 through 12.
So moved.
Moved by Tina,
Support.
supported by Stephanie. Discussion? Stephanie?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes,
And yes, motion carries. Approval of the 5th year of a 5-year probation for the following teachers, and again, we'll take teachers 1 through 8.
Moved.
Moved by Stephanie,
support,
supported by Carol. Discussion? Stephanie?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
Carol?
yes,
And yes, motion carries. Item J, approval of 4th year of 5-year probation for the following teachers, and we've got 2 in that category.
So moved.
Moved by Carol?
Supported.
no, it was
Supported.
Tina, it was Tina,
Oh, it was Tina.
Yes.
Moved by Tina, supported by Dan. Discussion? Stephanie?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
Carol?
yes,
And yes, motion carries. Item K, approval of 3rd year of 5-year probation for the following teachers, and we have 15 teachers in that group.
So moved.
Moved by Stephanie,
support,
supported by Carol. Discussion? Stephanie?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
Carol?
yes,
And yes, motion carries. 11, approval of 2nd year of a 5-year probation for the following teachers, and we have 9 teachers in that group.
Do you need to strike Nicole for 7?
Pardon me?
Do you need to strike Nicole for the month for number 7, all 7?
No, because she's still,
Okay.
that
sorry.
year's still.
Yeah.
she still gets,
Thank you.
So moved.
Okay, moved by Tina,
Support.
supported by Stephanie. Discussion?
Yes.
Stephanie?
Yes, sorry.
Dan?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
Carol?
yes,
And yes, motion carries. And item N, approval of the 2nd year of a 2-year probation. We have 14 teachers in that category.
So moved.
Moved by
Support.
Stephanie, supported by Tina.
Yep.
Discussion? Stephanie?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
Carol?
yes,
And yes, motion carries. Item N, first reading of the approval of Vicksburg Community Schools policies 6325 and 9160.
so move,
Moved by Carol,
Support.
supported by Tina. Discussion? Stephanie?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
Carol?
yes,
And yes, motion carries. Item O, second reading of approval of following Vicksburg Community Schools policies 7540.02, 7540.03, 7540.04, 8300, 8305, and 8315.
So moved.
Moved by Tina,
support,
supported by Carol. Discussion? Stephanie?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
Carol?
yes.
And yes, motion carries, and on that, we'll stand adjourned.